3:01 a.m., Harvard. A janitor stands before a wall of equations and one missing minus sign. The Maxwell Dworkin building slept like an anchored ship. Its corridors breathed a faint hum of machinery and disinfectant. The red digits of the hallway clock blinked 3:01 a.m., a time too late for night, too early for morning. Inside Lab H317, 5 graduate students huddled beneath the sharp glow of desk lamps. Their whiteboard was crowded with equations, matrices, integrals, and a few desperate arrows drawn in chalk. Someone had scrawled across the top in blue marker, Care equation, continuous algebraic Riccati equation. Find P. They had been working for hours, trying to stabilize a feedback system for a pediatric infusion pump. The project was funded by Helix Life Corporation, a powerful biotech company whose name carried both prestige and silence. At the far end of the room, Evelyn Hart pushed her janitor's cart slowly across the tile. The mop handle squeaked. Her back ached from 12 years of night shifts. She was 51, small, quiet, with hair the color of dust and silver. Her badge read simply, Facilities Staff. She kept her eyes low and her steps careful. Once, years ago, she had walked the same kind of room wearing a student's badge, valedictorian from a small high school in New Mexico, admitted to MIT on a scholarship she never took. Life had folded differently since then. Tonight, her only thought was to finish mopping before the snow began. But as she turned the corner of the table, her bucket caught on a laptop cord. The bucket tipped. A wave of soapy water spilled across the floor, spreading toward the student's feet. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then came laughter. Not cruel, but careless. "Great," one of the students said. "The midnight tsunami." Another chuckled. "Maybe it'll wash away our failure." Evelyn flushed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, reaching for paper towels. "No worries," said a tall boy in glasses, half smiling. "Just don't touch the board. We've been killing ourselves over this." She nodded, kneeling to clean the spill. Yet as she wrung the mop, her eyes caught a fragment of chalk near the edge of the whiteboard. The formula written across it. It's just balance. Every force has its echo, A and P, B and R. And when they finally cancel each other out, that's when the system rests. 0 means peace. Her breath paused. The sign before the PBR1BTP term. It should have been negative. She knew that, not from any textbook she owned now, but from the memory of an old library copy she'd borrowed as a teenager. Stability of linear control systems. In control theory, that tiny sign determined whether the system would spiral out or return home. The minus meant feedback, correction, balance. Without it, every small error grew until the system failed, just like the human heart when the pump that guided it ran too freely. Her daughter's heart had done exactly that 5 years ago. She closed her eyes, steadying her hands. When she looked again, one of the students, the one with the glasses, was rubbing his temples, muttering, "It diverges. Every time we iterate, it diverges." Evelyn's mop dripped quietly into the bucket. She hesitated, then picked up a small piece of chalk that had rolled under the table. Her hand trembled slightly as she rose. "Ma'am," someone began. She reached the board, and without a word, replaced the plus with a just that. The students stared. The equations shifted in meaning, like a door clicking open. One of them recalculated on his laptop. The line of code that had produced infinite output now produced convergence. "It stabilizes," he whispered. "Holy, it actually stabilizes." No one laughed now. They only looked at her, the janitor with chalk on her fingers, as if seeing her for the first time. Evelyn set the chalk back in its tray. "Sorry for the spill," she said softly. Silence followed, thick as dust. The only sound was the slow breath of the air conditioner, steady, mechanical, human in its way. She gathered her mop, squeezed the last of the water, and rolled her cart toward the door. But before leaving, her gaze drifted once more to the corner of the board. Beneath the new equation, faint erasure marks revealed 3 letters, once written and rubbed away. HLC. Helix Life Corporation. She had seen those letters before, on the hospital wristband they gave her daughter Grace the night of the trial procedure. Her throat tightened. The students, still stunned, began whispering among themselves. Where did she learn that? Did she just... Wait, how did she know about Riccati? Evelyn didn't answer. She pushed her cart through the hallway, the wheels squeaking softly over linoleum. Outside, the wind bit through the windows. Boston slept under a thin white crust of snow. Halfway down the corridor, a man in a black coat appeared from the stairwell. Tall, lean, face pale under the fluorescent light. He watched her without expression. Tough shift, he said. His voice was smooth, trained. You work in H317 tonight? She nodded. Careful what you touch, he said. Not every equation likes to be corrected. Then he turned, footsteps slow and even, and vanished into the stairwell. Evelyn stood still for a long moment, the smell of ammonia and chalk hanging between them. On his sleeve, just before he disappeared, she had glimpsed a stitched logo, HLC. She pushed her cart forward again. The air from the vents sighed like an exhausted heart. By the time she reached the end of the hallway, her phone buzzed. A text reminder she'd set for herself hours earlier. Call Diego at 6 a.m. Tell him you're fine. She smiled faintly. Diego was her son, 16 now, sleeping in their small apartment in Somerville. He didn't know what she once was, or what she'd just done. Outside, the first flakes of snow drifted past the glass. Somewhere behind her, on the board she'd left behind, the minus sign glowed faintly under the lab light. Small, ordinary, perfect. It was the difference between chaos and order, between guilt and peace, between the life her daughter lost and the truth Evelyn had just begun to find. Snow fell softly over Cambridge, drifting like sifted flour across the frozen streets. By late morning, the city had the hush of a cathedral. Evelyn finished her shift, turned in her badge, and stepped into the cold. The air smelled of salt and iron. On her phone, a new message waited. From Dr. Marcus Joe. Could we talk today? He explained that he taught control theory at Harvard. He had heard from the students about the janitor who fixed the equation. His note ended politely. If you have a few minutes, I'd like to understand what you saw. Evelyn read the lines twice before typing a single word. Yes. Pierce Hall was older than the building she cleaned, its halls lined with dark oak and photographs of professors long gone. She arrived a few minutes early and stood by the window, watching the snow fall sideways in the wind. Dr. Marcus Joe met her at the door. He was in his 50s, thin, thoughtful, the kind of man whose voice always carried the word listen, even when he said nothing. Ms. Hart? He asked, offering his hand. Evelyn, she said. He nodded. Thank you for coming. I wanted to ask about last night. The students say you changed one symbol on the board and the whole problem turned inside out. I just corrected the direction, she said. They had it pushing instead of balancing. He smiled slightly. That sounds simple, but it saved them a week of work. On his desk lay a printed page of the same equation, neat and harmless on paper. When I changed that sign myself this morning, he said, the numbers settled. I'd been watching their data misbehave for days. What you saw takes more than luck. Evelyn looked past him at the shelves of books. I used to study mathematics, she said quietly, before I cleaned floors. He waited. "My daughter Grace died 5 years ago," she continued. "She was part of a medical trial run by a company called Helix Life Corporation. They said a device was supposed to control the flow of medicine automatically. One night it sped up instead of slowing down. They told me later it was an unexpected feedback error. I didn't understand all the details then. Last night, when I saw the words infusion pump on that board, I remembered." Joe set the paper down carefully. "Helix Life," he repeated. "They fund several projects here. The students in that lab are using some of their data." "That explains the logo I saw," Evelyn said. "A man in a black coat stopped me after my shift. There were letters stitched on his sleeve. HLC. He told me not to touch equations that weren't mine." Joe frowned. That shouldn't happen on this campus. He opened a file on his computer, searching. There used to be a public summary of that pediatric trial. It's gone now. I saved a copy for a class discussion, but the link no longer works. He found the old printout and read the first lines. The description is almost identical to the project those students are running. He looked up. If the same mistake is written into Helix's design documents, they've carried it forward for years. Evelyn said nothing. The only sound was the radiator ticking under the window. After a while, Joe spoke again, slowly, as if thinking aloud. "In theory, that tiny sign decides whether a system corrects itself or spins out of control. It's not just math, it's moral. Every machine that touches a living body should choose the stabilizing path." "That's what I was trying to tell them," Evelyn said. "Minus doesn't mean failure. It means knowing when to pull back." He gave a small, sad nod. "I'm going to ask where that formula came from. If it's from Helix, we need to know." "You'll have trouble," she warned. "When Grace died, every file closed overnight. No one returned my calls. Her name disappeared from the hospital list like she was never there." Joe leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "Then we'll look for what can't be deleted. Every version leaves a trace, an email, a backup, a camera frame. The university records still images of the whiteboard every few minutes for security. If we find the photo from last night, we'll have proof the sign was wrong, and who corrected it." Evelyn managed a tired smile. "A shadow on the wall." "A good shadow," he said. "For now, don't tell anyone what we talked about. Keep your routine. Sometimes quiet is the safest shape truth can take." She stood to leave. "You sound like you've done this before." "I've been teaching too long not to notice when a story starts to write itself," he said. "And every story that begins with a correction tends to end with a reckoning." Outside, the afternoon snow had turned to sleet. She walked slowly, letting the cold sting her awake. For the first time in years, she felt the old rhythm of purpose, the same one that once drove her through long nights of study with a second-hand textbook and a cup of gas station coffee. At home, Diego was already back from school. He sat at the kitchen table doing homework, earbuds in. "You okay, Mom?" he asked without looking up. "Just a long day," she said. "We'll make chili tonight." He grinned. "With chocolate?" "With chocolate." They cooked together, the small apartment filling with warmth and the smell of cumin. After dinner, he retreated to his room with his guitar, and she washed the dishes, the sound of running water mixing with faint chords from behind his door. When the phone buzzed again, she dried her hands and read the new message. From Facilities Management. Please report to a different building until a safety review is complete. No signature, no explanation. She forwarded it to Joe with a short note. "Is this from you?" His reply came almost at once. "No. Stay calm. I'll find out who sent it." A minute later, another message followed. "Keep to your normal schedule. Noise makes mistakes. Calm remembers." She set the phone down and stared at the kitchen window. Beyond the glass, the city lights blurred into soft halos. Somewhere across the river, a man in a black coat might be watching another screen, sending another order. Evelyn poured herself tea and opened the small box she kept on the shelf. Inside lay the plastic hospital band with her daughter's name, Grace Hart. She traced the faded letters with her thumb. "I saw them again today," she whispered. "The same company. The same pride that couldn't admit a simple mistake." She slipped the band back into the box and closed it. In Diego's room, the music stopped. A door clicked shut. The apartment went still except for the low hum of the heater. Evelyn sat at the table, eyes on the steam rising from her tea, and thought about what Dr. Joe had said, that every machine touching a living body should choose the stabilizing path. She had spent years erasing herself to keep her balance. Now it seemed the world was asking her to add that missing sign again, not on a board, but inside her life. Outside, sleet hardened into new snow. In the quiet, she could almost hear the soft breath of the air conditioner from that Harvard lab, steady and slow, the same rhythm she had followed when she said, "Sorry for the spill." She whispered it again, not as an apology this time, but as a promise. "Grace, I'm going to fix it." Then she turned off the light, leaving the tea half full, and the city kept breathing, patient and cold, waiting for morning. The storm that night never quite ended. By morning, the snow had turned to a thin crust of ice that cracked under every step. Evelyn walked through it toward the small coffee shop across from the bus station, the one that opened before dawn for construction crews and nurses finishing their shifts. Inside, warmth and cinnamon. The barista knew her name, poured her usual black coffee, and left her alone. She liked that. No questions, no noise, just a booth by the window and the view of a city still half asleep. She took out a folded letter from her coat pocket. It was old, edges softened from years of opening and refolding. The letter was written in a young hand, the loops wide and confident. "Dear Mom, when I'm better, we should go see the desert again. I want to show you how the stars look when you don't have to share them with streetlights. Love, Grace." Evelyn read it slowly, as if the words were still being written somewhere in the sky. She had grown up far from any sky like this. Her hometown of Farmington, New Mexico, sat between cliffs the color of rust and sand that carried heat even after sunset. Her father drove a delivery truck for oil companies. Her mother cleaned motel rooms. Evelyn was their quiet child, the one who filled notebooks with numbers instead of drawings. At 16, she won a state math prize for solving a problem no one else could finish. The local newspaper printed her photo. A girl in a denim jacket holding a silver medal, her smile shy but sure. MIT sent her an admission letter the next spring. She kept it pinned to the refrigerator until the day her father's truck flipped on Highway 64. The scholarship didn't pay for grief or for groceries. She stayed home, found work at a diner, and told herself she'd reapply next year. Next year became a decade. Then Grace was born, and the world turned by her heartbeat. Grace had her father's eyes and Evelyn's calm. She loved patterns, counting ceiling tiles, arranging buttons by color, lining up seashells in perfect order. When she was 8, the doctor said her heart had a rhythm of its own, one that sometimes stumbled. They recommended a new treatment, something about an automated delivery pump to regulate medication. The trial was sponsored by a company with a sleek blue logo, Helix Life Corporation. They promised everything would be monitored. They promised safety. On the morning of the procedure, Evelyn remembered sitting beside Grace's bed, braiding her hair while the nurse attached sensors to her small chest. The machine hummed softly, a smooth silver box with lights that blinked in steady patterns. Grace called it the friendly robot. It was supposed to listen, to measure, correct, and adjust. That's what the brochure said. But somewhere inside its code, a simple reversal waited, an instruction that told it to push harder instead of easing back. When the readings rose, the machine responded by increasing flow, not reducing it. By the time alarms went off, Grace was already gone. The hospital blamed a feedback malfunction. Helix sent condolences and silence. Lawyers sent papers that said, "Closed investigation." Evelyn signed nothing. She simply stopped speaking about it. Until last night, when the words, "pediatric infusion pump," returned like an echo from the dead. Her coffee had gone cold. She wrapped her hands around the cup anyway, needing its weight. Across the street, traffic lights changed for no one. The world, she thought, never really stopped for any single grief. It just tilted slightly to make room for it. She walked to the bus stop, rode home through slush, and found Diego bent over his laptop at the kitchen table. "Physics test today," he said without looking up. "I think I finally get acceleration." She smiled. "It's just learning when to slow down and when to keep going." "Like driving?" "Exactly like driving." He looked at her. "You okay?" "Better than yesterday." That was true in a quiet way. Yesterday, she'd been only a worker. Today, she was part of something. Small, fragile, but moving. By afternoon, the sky cleared, a pale blue that belonged to early spring. Evelyn took the bus to Harvard Square. Dr. Joe had texted a short message. "Meeting postponed. New information soon." She decided to walk instead, down the narrow streets behind the yard where old houses leaned toward one another as if gossiping about the past. Every window held a slice of life, a student asleep at a desk, a violin propped against a chair, a cat watching the world with detached judgment. At the corner, a familiar voice stopped her. "Ms. Hart." It was Noah Bennett, the graduate student who'd laughed the night she spilled the water. Today he looked younger, nervous, as if the laughter had aged out of him overnight. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was rude." "You were tired," she replied. "No," he insisted. "I was arrogant. When you fixed the equation, I realized I didn't even understand what I was doing. I've been reading since then and, well, I wanted to say thank you." She studied him for a moment, saw sincerity there, and something else. Shame trying to turn itself into courage. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "We all correct our signs eventually." He smiled, uncertain if she meant math or life. "Dr. Joe told me to double-check where our data came from. The file we used was labeled HLC Trial Spec 07. It shouldn't even be on the university server. When I tried to open it again this morning, it was gone." "Gone how?" "Deleted. Every copy. The backup folder, too. And I got a warning email saying I'd accessed restricted material. I don't think it came from the school." Evelyn felt the old chill rise in her spine, the same one she'd felt reading the hospital letter after Grace's death. "You should be careful," she said. "So should you," he replied. That man in the black coat was in the hallway again. "Here?" "Near the server room. I think he saw me." They stood there, two unlikely allies on a snow-dusted sidewalk, their breath visible in the cold. "If you ever need help," Noah said quietly, "I'm in the engineering dorm, room 214. Don't email me, just knock." Then he turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, disappearing into the crowd. That evening, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table again, the city dark outside. Diego was at basketball practice. The apartment hummed with the steady pulse of the heater. She opened a blank notebook. On the first page, she wrote 3 lines. Grace, truth. Joe, trust. Helix, silence. Then she drew a single horizontal line beneath them, the simplest symbol she knew. A minus sign, long and thin, like the space between past and present. Under it she wrote, "Every storm begins with still air." She closed the notebook, set it beside the hospital wristband box, and let the quiet settle. The future felt close, like thunder waiting behind a closed sky. When Diego came home later, stomping snow from his shoes, he asked, "Mom, are you still working nights?" "Maybe not for long," she said. He looked at her, puzzled. "You're smiling." "I guess I am." She kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and stood for a moment listening to the faint rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway. It sounded like a heartbeat finding its balance again. Outside, a wind rose over the river. The first flakes of a new storm began to fall. Somewhere across town, a computer server blinked awake, recording the deletion of yet another file. And in a small apartment above a laundromat, Evelyn Hart, once a girl who dreamed of equations, began to remember who she had been before everything broke. The sky over Cambridge cleared to a thin winter blue, the kind of color that looks honest from a distance and cold up close. Evelyn walked across the yard with her coat zipped high and her hands tucked deep, following the path she knew by heart from years of night shifts. In daylight, the place felt like a museum of certainty. Old brick, frosted lawns, footsteps that sounded like purpose. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Marcus Joe. "Meeting at noon, room 204, Pierce Hall. Bring only yourself." She smiled at the phrasing. Only yourself. As if a person could ever leave the rest at home. Inside Pierce, the radiators hissed. Marcus was already there, sleeves rolled, a folder on the table. He had the look of a man who had slept fast, not long. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I have 2 pieces of news. One good, one not." "Give me the not first." He nodded. "I asked for the partner document that the students used to copy the control law. The dean's office replied that the file is proprietary to Helix Life Corporation and cannot be shared without written consent. 15 minutes later, the lab's shared drive removed the folder entirely. Our backup index shows an empty shell with yesterday's date." "And the good news?" she asked. "I recovered the whiteboard camera stills from the night you were there. The system snaps a photo every 5 minutes." He slid a print across the table. The picture showed the empty lab, the clock on the wall, the board crowded with writing. In the upper corner, beneath the project title, a small correction was visible as a darker stroke. "There's a clear sequence," he said. "First, the wrong version. Then, your correction. No faces, no drama, just the truth stepping forward 1 inch. Evelyn traced the corner of the photo with one finger, careful not to smudge the ink. "A quiet proof," she said. "A very quiet one," he agreed. "I brought it to Dean Calloway this morning. I asked for permission to audit our code and compare it to Helix's specification. He listened. He is a careful man. Then he reminded me that Helix funds a large portion of the lab's work, and that any accusation should be handled with discretion at an appropriate level. He used the word appropriate 3 times. He suggested I focus on teaching and leave compliance matters to the people who manage them." "Did he look at the photo?" "He glanced at it as if it were a weather report from a town he might never visit." Evelyn sat back. "So the file is gone. The dean is cautious, and the company is watching our hallway." "Correct," Marcus said. "But the equation is still the equation. And there is another path." He opened the folder and removed a thin stack of printed slides. 2 years ago, Helix presented at a closed seminar on campus. They pitched a robust control approach for infusion devices. I kept a copy of the abstract. It mentions the same architecture the lab is using. If we compare their public claim to our private evidence, we can write a technical note that asks a simple question. Is the control law in current use consistent with basic stability? We won't name patients or outcomes. We will write about signs and direction. That's it. Clean, narrow, and very hard to argue with. Evelyn nodded. And if they call it an honest mistake? Then they correct it in writing, he said. A written correction saves lives. Silence does not. She almost laughed. You make it sound easy. It won't be, he said. But it will be clear. He closed the folder. Before I do anything formal, there is one more thing. You received that message from facilities last night. I checked. It did not come from our office. The address was a generic mailbox that can be set up by anyone with system access. I've asked for a trace. So someone wants me away from that lab. And from the people in it, he said, which means you're closer than they like. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus looked up. Come in. Noah Bennett stepped inside, shoulders hunched against a cold that seemed to have followed him down the hall. He held his cap in both hands like a student about to apologize to the principal. Hi, he said to Evelyn, then turned to Marcus. Professor, you asked me to bring anything I could find. He placed a small flash drive on the table. This is a screen recording I made last week when I was testing my code. It captured the partner document open in one corner for about 10 seconds. I didn't realize it until this morning. After the file disappeared, I checked the recording. The title bar shows the document name and a partial code. You can't read the whole thing, but you can read enough. It matches the abstract the company presented 2 years ago. Marcus exhaled in a way that sounded like gratitude and fatigue at the same time. Noah, this is important. Thank you. Noah looked at Evelyn. The night you corrected the board, I was the one who laughed. I keep thinking about that. My dad runs a small repair shop in Ohio. He says most mistakes are just pride taking the long way around. I'd like to take the short way for once. Evelyn smiled. You just did. Noah swallowed. There's something else. A man in a black coat was waiting near the server closet this morning. I've seen him twice now. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'll request campus security to escort students in that wing after hours, he said, and I'll insist on a formal note from Helix that their representatives must check in with the department before entering research areas. They won't like that, Noah said. They don't have to, Marcus replied. They just have to follow the rules we forgot to enforce. He turned back to Evelyn. For now, here's our plan. I'll draft a short memo to the lab requiring a line-by-line audit of definitions. No company names, no accusations, just clarity. I'll also prepare a separate document for the dean with the whiteboard photos and Noah's screen capture. If the dean denies the audit, we file an internal ethics review that freezes the project until the source of the specification is verified. That buys time and records our concern. And me? Evelyn asked. You do your rounds in the other building for a few days, he said. If anyone contacts you outside official channels, save the message and say nothing. We will keep the court in the open, not in the hallway. Noah hesitated by the door. Ms. Hart, if this turns bad, I can say I made the change on the board. It won't be true, but I can take the heat. Evelyn shook her head. Truth is steady, Noah. Let it stand upright. Besides, I don't mind being the janitor who knew which way the arrow should point. He left with a crooked grin that made him look suddenly younger. When the door closed, Marcus sat again and rubbed his temples. I need to warn you about something else, he said. If Helix feels cornered, they will try to cast this as a turf fight between faculty and a sponsor. They will talk about innovation and speed. They will say the sign was a typo that never touched a device. They will ask us to trust their internal fixes. They will ask us to be reasonable. And we will be. Yes, he said, but not quiet. Evelyn walked to the window. Outside, students moved in small clusters, heads down against the wind. She watched a young woman adjust her scarf and laugh at something only the two of them would ever hear. For a moment, Evelyn felt the twin pull of two lives, the one she had, and the one that had almost been. She thought of Grace at 8, lining up seashells on a windowsill in perfect symmetry. She thought of the machine that had promised to listen and had not. "Marcus," she said, still looking at the yard, "when you publish that note, don't make it about brilliance. Make it about care. Say the obvious out loud, that it matters which way we push when a child's body is the system." "I will," he said. She turned back. "What happens if the dean shuts you down?" "I go higher," he said. "And if higher shuts me down, I go public with a technical letter that names no one and points at the mountain. Some hills you climb even if the lodge is closed." The clock on the wall ticked through a small silence. Marcus closed the folder and slid it to his side of the table as if he were replacing a book on a shelf. "Evelyn," he said, "would you consider speaking to a small circle of my students next week? Not about math. About responsibility. They need to see the person behind the board." She considered. "I will. But I won't tell them what to think." "They'll know," he said. They walked out together. In the hallway, the light was softer, and the air smelled faintly of coffee from a nearby machine. At the stairwell, Marcus stopped. "One more thing," he said. "I spoke to your supervisor this morning. Your reassignment is temporary, and it will be documented properly. I asked for that in writing. You won't be left to rumors." "Thank you," she said. The words felt simple and right. On the ground floor, she paused by a bulletin board. Posters layered over one another. Lectures, concerts, a lost scarf. Someone had pinned a blank index card in the corner. In neat black ink, a hand had written 2 sentences. "Fix the small wrong thing in front of you. That is how the big wrong things begin to bend." Evelyn touched the edge of the card and kept walking. Outside, the air was bright and cold enough to make her eyes water. She crossed the yard and caught her reflection in a long window. A middle-aged woman in a plain coat, face set, carrying nothing but herself. Behind the glass, students passed with backpacks and plans. The day felt like a held breath. Somewhere on campus, a drive had been emptied. Somewhere else, a photograph had been printed and set aside. Somewhere in the space between those places, the silent equation kept speaking, the way truth always does when no one is listening yet. Evelyn headed for the bus stop, thinking of chili and laundry and the way Diego's music filled the apartment like a steady pulse. She thought of the minus sign, thin and firm, the smallest line that could stand for a life. And she promised herself, as the wind lifted a scatter of dry snow along the path, that she would keep choosing the direction that set things right, even if the people with the loudest voices told her to be still. The storm broke with a brittle kind of quiet. Ice melted from the gutters and slid down in clear ribbons, leaving the streets shining like wet mirrors. Evelyn rode the bus to work, her reflection flickering in the window, her mind steady on one thought: keep going. Pierce Hall looked calm from the outside, its red brick warmed by the morning sun. Inside, the silence felt staged, like a classroom after an exam. She'd been moved officially to another building, a lab that studied polymers and nothing more dangerous than spilled coffee. Still, she could feel the invisible wire stretching back toward H317, tugging at her. At noon, her phone buzzed. It was a short message from Marcus. "We found something. Come by my office at 3. She typed back a single word: coming. When she entered his office, Noah Bennett was already there, sitting stiffly in the chair opposite Marcus's desk. A flash drive rested on the table between them. Noah stood as she entered. "Hi, Ms. Hart," he said. His voice had lost the quick rhythm of a student rushing to be clever. "You'd better sit for this." Marcus closed the door and lowered his voice. Noah recovered a fragment of a backup file from the lab's cache. It's dated 3 months ago, before Helix uploaded their last package. The file name reads HLC Trial PD07. The letters made the room tilt slightly under Evelyn's feet. "That's Grace's trial," she said. Marcus nodded. "I'm afraid it is. The file's damaged, but the data we can read shows recorded flow rates from infusion tests. The column headings list pressure, dosage, and a control variable labeled simply gain. The trend is wrong. Every increase in measured flow triggered an increase in motor speed instead of a reduction. It's the same reversal you corrected on the board." Evelyn looked from Marcus to Noah. "So it wasn't just a typo in a paper?" "No," Marcus said. "It was the foundation of the whole algorithm. They've been using it for at least 5 years. If the system ever ran in a real device—" "It did," she said. "I watched it." The room went still. Outside, a student laughed on the sidewalk. A high sound carried through glass. Marcus turned his laptop around. On the screen was a graph. A simple line climbing fast until it disappeared off the top. "That spike," he said quietly, "is what happens when feedback turns the wrong way. You can correct for noise, for drift, for nearly anything but pride." Evelyn's throat felt dry. "How long before they notice you've got this file?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "The drive Noah used was disconnected from the network, but the moment we open or copy anything, Helix's servers might log it. We're working offline now. I'll print the graphs and keep the drive in a safe." Noah leaned forward. "There's more. The metadata shows the last person to modify the file was someone named G. Harlan. Does that name mean anything to you?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "He was there the night Grace died. He was the lead engineer. He said, 'We'll find out what went wrong.' Then he stopped returning calls." Marcus sighed. "He's their campus liaison now. Teaches part-time, visits the lab. The man in the black coat." The afternoon light faded to gold, then gray. They spoke in low tones while the building emptied around them. By 6 o'clock, Marcus had a plan. He would send an encrypted copy of the file and the photo of the whiteboard to a friend in the university's ethics office, someone he trusted. "If anything happens to me," he said, "you both will have proof that this conversation took place." Noah hesitated. "Professor, we might be crossing a line." Marcus shook his head. The line was crossed when a child died and someone decided that silence was easier. Evelyn watched him print the summary page. The sound of the machine filled the office, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. When the last sheet slid out, he placed it in a plain folder and handed it to her. "Keep this somewhere safe tonight. Don't email, don't text, don't mention it to anyone. Tomorrow I'll meet with the ethics chair and decide our next step." She tucked the folder into her bag. "I'll keep it safe." Marcus smiled faintly. "You have a talent for that." At home that evening, Diego was sprawled on the couch, watching an old basketball game. "Hey, Mom," he said, "you look like someone who's about to fix something big." She laughed despite herself. "Just work." He muted the TV. "You okay?" "I'm fine." It was mostly true. She heated leftovers, listened to his stories about practice, and pretended the folder in her bag wasn't pulsing like a second heartbeat. After he went to bed, she sat at the kitchen table, the papers spread before her. She read each line carefully, even the parts she didn't fully understand. Pressure rising, valve closed, flow continuing. Halfway through, she stopped. There, in a small corner of the page, someone had typed a note. "Testing phase complete. Proceed to pilot rollout under supervision of GH." She reached for her phone to photograph it, then hesitated. Instead, she copied the line by hand into her notebook. The same notebook that held her list: Grace, Joe, Helix. She added one more name beneath them: Harlan. Outside, a car rolled past on wet pavement. A moment later, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number? Stop digging, Mrs. Hart. We're sorry for your loss. Let it rest. Her pulse jumped. She deleted the message, then blocked the number, but the words stayed like smoke in the room. The next morning she woke early. The world was pale and silent, a thin frost on the window pane. She checked her phone. No new messages from Marcus. None from Noah. She brewed coffee, sat by the window, and waited for light. By mid-morning, she couldn't wait any longer. She took the folder and caught the bus to Harvard. When she reached Pierce Hall, the front doors were locked. A yellow notice hung on the glass. Building closed for maintenance. Access restricted. Her stomach tightened. She circled around to the side entrance. Two men in dark coats stood there, talking quietly. She recognized one of them even before he turned. Gregory Harlan. "Mrs. Hart," he said pleasantly, as if greeting an old neighbor. "I was hoping to see you." She froze. "You shouldn't know my name." He smiled. "Harvard is a small town, really." "I heard you've been helping Dr. Zhou with some paperwork. He's been overextended. I'd like you to give me what he asked you to hold. It belongs to Helix." "It belongs to the truth," she said. He sighed. "That's such a noble word. The problem is truth doesn't pay for research grants. Or rent. You've done enough, Ms. Hart. Go home." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have a son, don't you? A fine boy. Keep his life simple. That's good advice." She met his eyes, felt fear twist in her stomach, and spoke before she could stop herself. "If you ever come near my family again, you'll find out what a janitor can do with a mop handle." For a second, the corner of his mouth twitched. Then he turned away, gesturing for the other man to follow. "Good luck cleaning up," he said, and walked toward the parking lot. Evelyn stood still until their car pulled away, tires hissing on the wet road. Then she ran down the block to the small bakery where she knew she could use the phone without being noticed. She called Marcus. No answer. She tried again. On the third ring, a voicemail picked up. "You've reached Dr. Zhou. Please leave a message." "Marcus, it's Evelyn," she said. "They know about the file. Harlan spoke to me. Call when you can." She hung up, ordered a coffee she wouldn't drink, and sat near the window. Across the street, a police car turned the corner toward Pierce Hall. By afternoon, the news had reached her through whispers. Dr. Marcus Zhou had been placed on temporary leave, pending review of research conduct. No one knew who filed the complaint. Noah's dorm room had been searched for security reasons. Evelyn walked home through sleet that stung her face. She unlocked her door, closed it behind her, and finally let herself cry, quietly, without movement, the way someone cries who knows that silence is safer. When the tears stopped, she looked at the folder again. The pages were still there, clean, untouched. She thought of Grace, of her small hand tracing lines on a notepad. Then she picked up her pen and wrote at the bottom of the last page, "If this file disappears, someone else will rewrite it. Someone always does. But the numbers are in my head now, and I don't forget." She slid the papers back into the envelope, sealed it, and hid it behind the old box of Christmas ornaments in the hall closet. Later, when Diego came home, she smiled and asked about his day. He talked about a pop quiz and a friend's new sneakers, and she listened, nodding, her face calm. But inside, she knew that the fight had changed shape. It was no longer about equations or files. It was about who got to decide when the truth was too inconvenient to keep, and she had already made her choice. Boston turned gray again. The snow that had made the city glow now lay in dirty piles along the streets, heavy and half-melted, the color of forgotten paper. Evelyn walked past them with her collar up and her mind fixed on one name, Harlan. It had been 3 days since Marcus's suspension and Noah's dorm inspection. The university called it temporary. She knew that word. Temporary meant until people forget. She still hadn't heard from Marcus. She tried his phone, his email, even the department office. Nothing. Each unanswered ring felt like a door closing somewhere she couldn't reach. That morning, her supervisor had reassigned her again, this time to the administrative building across from Harvard Yard. Just routine rotation, he'd said too quickly. Safer, quieter. She didn't argue. Quiet had never been the same as safe. At lunch, she carried her sandwich to the edge of the yard. The ground was slick, the benches wet, but she found a dry spot near the statue everyone called John Harvard and sat down. The campus looked unchanged, but she could feel a tension under it, like the faint hum of electricity in a wire you're not supposed to touch. Mrs. Hart. The voice behind her was low, polite, and unmistakable. She turned slowly. Gregory Harlan stood a few steps away, wearing the same black coat, his gloved hands folded in front of him. The last traces of snow clung to the shoulders of his coat like dust. "You have a talent for being in the wrong place at the right time," he said. "Mind if I sit?" "I'd rather you didn't," she answered. He sat anyway, leaving a careful distance between them. His movements were clean, efficient, the way a surgeon might move when he knows everyone is watching. "I'll keep this short," he said. "Dr. Joe has been placed on leave. Mr. Bennett is under academic review. That leaves you." "I'm not your problem," Evelyn said. He smiled faintly. "Everyone is someone's problem. I don't want this to turn unpleasant. The document you have, give it to me and we're finished." "I don't have it anymore." "Then tell me where it is." She shook her head. "You think I'd tell you after what you did?" His smile vanished. "I did what the system required. Experiments fail. We improve them. That's how progress works. You killed my daughter." For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt, irritation. "The device malfunctioned," he said. "A complex system, one bad variable. No one wanted that outcome." "Then why erase it?" "Because stories like that destroy funding," he said quietly. "And without funding, there's no research, no innovation, no chance to prevent the next mistake. Do you understand? We can't afford the truth every time it hurts." Evelyn looked at him. "Then what's left to afford?" He leaned closer, voice calm. "Listen to me. The world doesn't run on right and wrong. It runs on momentum. If you stop a project like ours, hundreds of jobs vanish. Hospitals lose equipment. You think you're saving lives, but you're breaking the machine that saves them." "The machine already broke," she said. He stood. This conversation never happened. He turned to leave, but she caught his sleeve. "You could fix it," she said. "You could tell the truth." He looked down at her hand on his arm. "No one would believe a janitor over a corporation." She let go. "They will if she knows how to make them listen." He hesitated, then walked away across the yard. The black of his coat cut through the snow like ink across paper, disappearing into the crowd of students. That night, Evelyn returned home early. Diego was out with friends. The apartment was still. She heated a bowl of soup and ate standing at the counter, then opened the closet and took out the folder she'd hidden. She spread the papers across the kitchen table again, the graphs, the printed data. The note about pilot rollout under supervision of GH. She stared at the letters. GH. The man in the black coat had signed death with his initials. The phone rang. Her hand shook as she answered. "Hello?" "Mrs. Hart," a voice said, quiet but urgent. "It's Noah." "Noah? Where are you?" "I don't have long. They took my laptop. They said I violated network policy. But I copied the file before they deleted it again. It's on a private server outside the university." She felt her heart rise. "You have it?" "I do. And Dr. Joe's fine. They didn't arrest him, just pulled him off campus. He told me to tell you he's staying somewhere safe." "Thank God," she said. "Noah, listen, Harlan came to see me today. He knows about the folder. He threatened me." A pause. "He won't stop, Mrs. Hart. He's protecting something bigger than the project. There's a private contract between Helix and the Department of Defense, biomedical automation. If this leaks, it's not just a scandal, it's federal." Evelyn felt her knees weaken. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they'll bury this deeper than we can dig, but we can still shine a light. Dr. Joe wants to publish the data anonymously through an ethics journal overseas. He sent me the draft." "What do you need from me?" "The original pages, the whiteboard photo, anything that proves you saw it first." "I can bring them tonight." "No," he said quickly. "They might be watching your building. I'll come to you. Midnight, the park behind the library. Small bench near the river." She hesitated. "Noah, are you sure?" But the line went dead. She spent the next few hours pacing. The apartment's shadows grew long and sharp. Outside, the wind rattled the window frames. She checked the clock every few minutes. Midnight felt far away and too close at once. At 11:30, she put the papers in a brown envelope, tucked it under her coat, and stepped into the cold. The streets were nearly empty. Snow crunched under her boots. She crossed the bridge toward the park, where the Charles River moved slow and dark beneath a crust of ice. A single bench sat under a street lamp. Noah wasn't there yet. She sat down, clutching the envelope against her chest, eyes scanning the shadows. Minutes passed, then footsteps. She turned and froze. It wasn't Noah. Gregory Harlan stepped from the darkness, gloveless this time, his face pale under the lamp. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you." "You're in over your head, Mrs. Hart." "Funny," she said. "That's what the doctors told me when Grace died." He sighed. "Noah made a mistake. He went to Joe's apartment earlier. They were planning to leak proprietary data. I intercepted their message." "What did you do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Nothing irreversible," he said. "Joe's been relocated. Noah is under supervision." She stood, the envelope still in her hands. "You're lying." "Believe what you want. But if you keep pushing, you'll join them." He reached for the envelope. She stepped back. "Don't," she said. "You've taken enough." He stopped. "Last chance," he said. "You can walk away right now. Take your son, move anywhere. No one will bother you." Evelyn felt the weight of every long night, every floor she'd mopped, every quiet moment when she'd swallowed her own anger. "You still don't understand," she said. "I'm not the one who can't sleep at night." Before he could answer, a light flared at the far end of the park, a car turning in from the main road. Harlan glanced toward it, distracted for half a second. Evelyn used that second. She threw the envelope into the snowbank behind her, hard enough that it vanished under the white crust. When he looked back, her hands were empty. "Where is it?" he snapped. "Gone," she said. He stepped closer, eyes cold. "You'll regret this." "I already do," she said. He turned and walked away, his figure shrinking until it merged with the darkness by the trees. The car that had turned in never reached the park. It drove past and vanished along the river. Evelyn waited until his footsteps faded. Then she dropped to her knees and dug through the snow until her fingers found the edge of the envelope. She brushed it clean, tucked it inside her coat, and whispered, "Not yet." She walked home under the silent sky, the streetlights glinting on the frozen ground. The city looked asleep, but she knew better. Somewhere behind those quiet windows, people were moving files, writing memos, deciding what truth was worth. And somewhere in a hidden office, Gregory Harlan would be making his next call. When she reached her apartment, she locked the door twice and leaned against it, shaking. The envelope was still warm from her body. She placed it in the oven, unlit, cold, but safe for now. She poured a glass of water and looked out the window. Across the street, a dark car idled for a moment, then pulled away. She whispered to the empty room, "Grace, your story isn't over." Outside, a snowflake drifted against the glass, melted, and was gone. Morning came late and gray. The city sounded muffled, as if the snow itself was listening. Evelyn hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of her and a cup of coffee she didn't touch. The air smelled faintly of dust and paper. At 6, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't know. "Mrs. Hart?" a voice said. She recognized it instantly. "Noah." "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm all right. They questioned me, took my ID, but I got out. Dr. Joe's safe, too. He's staying in an apartment near the river. We've got a plan." Her heart steadied. "Thank God. What do you need me to do?" "Bring the documents tonight. Joe wants to record everything, screens, photos, even your statement. We'll make a single package of evidence, post it on multiple servers at once. Once it's public, they can't bury it again." "Where?" "The apartment's above a bookstore called Riverbend Books. Back door, up the stairs. 7 p.m. Don't tell anyone." "I'll be there." Noah paused. "Evelyn, be careful. They're watching both of us." "I know," she said. "I'm done being quiet." By evening, the city was wrapped in fog. Street lamps blurred into halos. Evelyn carried the envelope inside her coat, close to her chest. When she reached the bookstore, the closed sign hung crookedly in the window. She climbed the narrow back stairs. The door opened before she knocked. Dr. Joe stood there, thinner, his eyes shadowed but alive. A small lamp lit the room behind him, books stacked against the wall, a laptop on the table, 2 mugs of tea already cooling. "Evelyn," he said softly, "it's good to see you." She hugged him, something she'd never done before. "I thought you were gone." "Almost," he said. "But we're still breathing. That counts." Noah sat by the window, his laptop open, cords running like veins to a hard drive. "We've mirrored everything to 3 servers already," he said. "Once we add your documents, we can finalize the proof." Evelyn took the envelope from her coat and handed it to Joe. He spread the pages carefully, smoothing the creases with his palm. The graphs looked harmless in the soft light, a pattern of lines and numbers. Joe pointed to one line. "Here," he said. "This is the reversal. See how the flow rate rises when pressure rises? That's the signature of the wrong feedback. In plain language, the machine speeds up when it should slow down." Evelyn nodded. "That's what killed her." "Yes," Joe said quietly. "And the metadata confirms who approved it." He tapped the corner of the page. "Modified by G. Harlan." Noah turned his laptop toward them. "I ran the simulation again with the correct formula. Look." On the screen, a line rose, dipped, and settled into a steady rhythm. "This is how it should behave," he said. "Stable, predictable, safe. Then he changed one character, reran the code. The line spiked upward, wild and climbing. "And this," he said, "is what they built." Joe closed the laptop. "That's enough." For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence. Outside, fog pressed against the window like a curtain. Evelyn finally spoke. "What happens when we send this out?" Joe rubbed his hands together as if warming them. "It will reach people who can't ignore it. Scientific journals, medical boards, maybe even the press. They'll verify, argue, and eventually understand. Helix will try to deny it. They'll say it was a draft, an error in testing, anything. But they can't erase it once it's seen." "And Harlan?" He looked at her. "Men like him only fall when the ground shifts under them. We're about to start the quake." They began to work. Joe dictated notes for context while Noah typed. Evelyn read each paragraph aloud to check for clarity. The sign error in the control law leads to positive feedback under all operating conditions, producing unbounded flow rates and potential harm to patients. Evidence from archived data confirms the persistence of this error through multiple revisions. Joe paused. "That's the heart of it," he said. "Simple, precise, undeniable." Evelyn added, "You should mention the whiteboard photo, the night it was corrected." He nodded and wrote, "A correction made by an independent observer confirmed the reversal and stabilized the system immediately. Subsequent data align with the corrected form." Noah uploaded the draft, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. "Server 1 complete," he said. 2 and 3 syncing now." The apartment felt smaller as the minutes passed. The hum of the laptop fan filled the space. Evelyn poured tea for everyone, though no one drank. When the final upload finished, Noah hit send. A confirmation window popped up. "File shared successfully." Joe exhaled. "There it is, out in the world." Evelyn sat back, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time in years, she felt something like air returning to her lungs. The moment didn't last. From the street below came the sound of tires on gravel. Then a car door slammed. Joe moved to the window and froze. "What is it?" Noah asked. "2 men," Joe said. "Black coats. They're coming this way." Evelyn's heart kicked hard. "Harlan? I can't tell." The knock on the door came fast, 3 sharp raps. Noah whispered, "We have backups, right?" "Yes," Joe said. 1 on a cloud server in Geneva, 1 mirrored to the university's archive under my old credentials. Another knock, louder. Evelyn looked at the laptop. "Can they trace it?" "Eventually," Noah said, "but not before it spreads." Joe straightened his shoulders. "Then it's worth it." The door shook under a heavy fist. "Open up," a voice called. Noah unplugged the hard drive, shoved it into his backpack. "There's a fire escape out the back," he whispered. "Go." Evelyn grabbed her coat. Joe stopped her. "You first," he said. "No arguments." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll stall them." The door rattled again. Noah opened the window, the cold air rushing in. Evelyn climbed through, gripping the metal railing with numb hands. Noah followed. From inside, she heard Joe's calm voice say, "You don't have a warrant." Then the door burst open. She didn't look back. They scrambled down the icy steps to the alley below. A shout echoed from above. "Go!" Noah yelled. They ran, slipping on wet pavement, turning corners until the bookstore was far behind. At the end of the block, they stopped to catch their breath. Evelyn leaned against a lamppost, gasping. "Do you think he's—" Noah nodded, eyes fierce. He knew what he was doing. Sirens wailed in the distance. The fog swallowed the sound as they crossed the bridge. By the time they reached Evelyn's apartment, the first headlines had begun to appear. Anonymous researchers leak Harvard control study data. Possible device malfunction linked to fatal trial. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen on Noah's phone. "It's out," she whispered. Noah nodded. "And spreading fast." She sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. "Grace," she said softly, "they'll finally see you." Noah sat across from her, rubbing his eyes. "Joe made me promise to finish it if anything happened. He said the truth doesn't need heroes, just caretakers." "Then that's what we'll be," she said. Outside, dawn began to break over the river. The fog lifted slowly, revealing a city waking to the sound of traffic and news alerts. Evelyn watched the light grow stronger, touching the edges of the buildings, the snow, the water. Somewhere, Gregory Harlan would be reading the same headlines, realizing what they had done. She didn't know what came next. Maybe lawyers, maybe threats, maybe silence. But for the first time since Grace's death, Evelyn felt something close to peace. The proof existed now, in code, in data, in the steady hands of those who refused to look away. And though the world outside her window was cold, the air inside the room was warm with the simple truth that had survived the night. The story broke at dawn. By mid-morning, every local newsfeed was running the same headline: leaked Harvard file links, device error to child deaths. Evelyn watched the broadcast from a diner window, the sound muted but the captions racing across the screen like an old ticker tape. A photo of the campus. A clip of the Helix Life Corporation logo. Then a grainy still of a whiteboard, her whiteboard, with the faint minus sign visible near the corner. She put down her coffee. Her hands were steady, but inside she felt the strange calm that comes after the roof has already fallen. The part where there's nothing left to lose. Across town, Helix held a press conference. Gregory Harlan stood at the podium in his perfect black suit. He looked rested, measured, as if the last few nights had been ordinary. "Our internal review," he said to the cameras, "shows no evidence that any released product contained the so-called instability described in these online files. The equations circulating on the internet represent an early draft, not the final design. We are cooperating fully with the university." He smiled slightly. "This is a misunderstanding." The journalists nodded, taking notes. It was always easy to print the official version first. The truth could wait until next week. By afternoon, Marcus Joe was still missing. The university released a statement calling him a person of interest in an unauthorized data transfer. Noah received an email suspending his student access, pending investigation. Evelyn's name did not appear anywhere, which somehow made the silence heavier. She spent the day scrubbing the floors of the administration building as if the world hadn't cracked. Students walked by whispering about the leak, about that crazy janitor story. No one knew her face. That anonymity was her armor now. At 5 o'clock, she clocked out and walked home through a sky the color of ash. When she reached her apartment, Diego was waiting with a newspaper folded on the counter. "Mom," he said, voice tight. "This is you, isn't it?" She froze. The photo showed the corner of a lab, her silhouette blurred behind glass. He held up the page. "You did this?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "They're calling you a whistleblower." "I didn't blow anything," she said. "I just told the truth out loud." He looked down. "They might come after you." "They already did," she said, and managed a small smile. "But I'm still here." He pulled her into a hug, fierce and wordless. For the first time in years, he didn't seem like a boy anymore. 2 days later, the collapse began in earnest. Helix's stock fell 12% before noon. An anonymous source within the Food and Drug Administration confirmed that earlier prototypes of the infusion device had been recalled quietly, with no public notice. Hospitals started reviewing their own records. The names of 3 more children appeared in the news, their parents demanding answers. By nightfall, the story had left Boston and gone national. Evelyn's phone filled with messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, lawyers, strangers thanking her for courage she wasn't sure she owned. One message came from a blocked number. "You think this ends here?" She deleted it without reading further. On the 3rd morning, she received an email from Noah. "Dr. Joe is gone. The police say missing, but I found his laptop. He left a file labeled for Evelyn. I'm bringing it tonight." She met him at the same river park where everything had begun. The fog hung low over the water, turning the city lights into halos. Noah handed her a small envelope. "He must have written it before the raid," he said. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means the file survived. Good. The truth always finds another home. Don't waste time on anger. Let what we proved stand for itself. If they erase my name, so be it. Yours is the one that matters now. Tell your son that his mother did the hardest kind of math, the kind that trades fear for balance. Take care of the minus sign. MZ." Evelyn folded the note carefully. The paper smelled faintly of tea. "He knew what was coming," she said. Noah nodded. "He wanted you to have this." "Where will you go?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "They kicked me off campus. Maybe somewhere quiet. Maybe I'll teach. What about you?" "I'm going home," she said. "Back to New Mexico. There's work to do." She packed that night. 2 suitcases, 1 box of books, and the envelope she could never let go of. The next morning, she left the apartment keys on the counter with a note for the landlord. Diego met her at the bus station carrying his backpack and his guitar. "Are we really doing this?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "We're going back to where it started." The bus pulled out of Boston as the sun rose. In the distance, the skyline shimmered in pale light. She closed her eyes and thought of Marcus's note. Take care of the minus sign. The road stretched west for 2 days, across plains and dust and memory. When they reached Farmington, New Mexico, the air smelled of cedar and gasoline. The town hadn't changed much. The same diner, the same faded sign on the library where she used to spend her summers solving problems no one asked her to. She rented a small house on the edge of town, its porch facing the desert. On the 3rd morning, she walked to the community center and asked for a room to teach in. "Teach what?" the manager asked. "Math," she said, "and a little patience." The next week, 3 kids showed up. The week after, there were 9. They came from farms, from trailers, from streets she still knew by name. She wrote simple lessons on the board. Equations, diagrams, the shape of a steady rhythm. One afternoon, a girl raised her hand. "What's that line, Ms. Hart? The little one between 2 numbers?" Evelyn smiled. "That's a minus sign," she said. "It means we're taking something away to make the balance right again." The girl nodded as if she understood. Back east, Helix Life's collapse was slower, quieter. Their investors fled. Harlan resigned for personal reasons. The government opened a review that would drag on for years. The headlines thinned, then vanished. But the data stayed on the web, archived by strangers. The truth, once spoken, refused to die. Sometimes, after class, Evelyn sat on the porch and watched the sun slide down behind the red cliffs. Diego would play guitar on the steps, soft blues that carried on the wind. She'd close her eyes and imagine Marcus somewhere far away, at peace, his voice carried in the dry air. One evening, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single line written in a careful hand. The system converged. "Thank you." No signature. She smiled. It didn't need one. She pinned the note above her desk next to a photograph of Grace, a girl with sunburned cheeks and eyes bright as desert light. Evelyn whispered, "It's fixed now, sweetheart. The world's a little steadier." Outside, the desert wind moved across the porch, gentle, even, as if breathing for her. She took a long sip of tea and watched the first stars appear, the same stars Grace had wanted to show her again. The desert had its own kind of silence, not the absence of sound, but a fullness made of wind, distance, and waiting. Evelyn had come to love it. Each morning she swept the porch, watched the sun climb over the cliffs, and began class with her dozen students from the valley. They called her Ms. Hart, and when she smiled, it was the quiet kind that came from someone who'd stopped expecting miracles and learned to make do with truth. It had been nearly a year since she left Boston. News about the Helix case had cooled into a line of small print updates, settlements, resignations, a committee report that said everything without saying anything. But the leaked data, Marcus's proof, Noah's code, her handwritten note, still lived online. Copies had traveled to servers she would never see, and in forums she'd never heard of, people used the phrase the minus sign to mean the moment when someone refused to look away. Evelyn didn't follow it. She had a different life now. She taught in the mornings, cooked in the afternoons, and in the evenings she walked out beyond the houses to watch the desert change color with the sky. Sometimes Diego joined her, guitar slung across his back, fingers finding soft chords that seemed older than either of them. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. One April afternoon, the mail truck came rumbling down the dirt road. The driver waved and handed her a thin envelope with a foreign stamp, Geneva, Switzerland. Her hands trembled before she even read the name. Marcus Joe. She stood on the porch, staring at the handwriting she knew too well. Neat, deliberate, each letter drawn as if the writer feared to press too hard. She sat down on the step, slit the envelope open with her thumbnail, and unfolded the letter. Evelyn. By the time you read this, you'll have built something that lasts longer than data. A space for learning, perhaps, or for forgiveness. I am writing from Geneva, where I've been helping a small ethics board review the Helix documents. We presented the evidence you helped uncover, and the board voted unanimously to reopen the case. It's official now. The error has been admitted, the devices recalled, and new safety standards are being written in your daughter's name. There's one more thing. The university never cleared my name, but that doesn't matter. The truth stands on its own legs. I wanted you to know that the proof file, our proof, has been archived at the International Institute of Systems Research under the title The Heart Correction. I chose that name myself. The minus sign doesn't just stabilize systems, Evelyn. It redeems souls. MZ. Her breath caught. The paper blurred. She read it again, slower this time, letting each sentence sink like rain into dry soil. The Heart Correction. Her daughter's name, finally printed somewhere that would never be erased. That evening, she gathered her students outside behind the community center. The sun was sliding down the cliffs, painting the sand red gold. They brought their notebooks, curious, not sure why their teacher looked both happy and sad. "I want to tell you a story," she said. "It's about a mistake, a very small one. Someone once wrote a plus sign where a minus sign should have been. That mistake cost lives, but fixing it changed the world a little. It taught me that even a tiny line, written in the right direction, can hold the weight of love." A boy raised his hand. "Did you fix it, Ms. Hart?" She smiled. "Not alone, but I helped." The children nodded, solemn in the way only the young can be when they feel they're being trusted with something grown up. "Now," she said, "who can tell me what subtraction really means?" A small girl near the back answered softly, "It means taking away what doesn't belong." Evelyn's eyes stung. "Exactly," she said. "It means balance." That night, after the children left, she sat by the window with a candle and reread Marcus's letter. The flame flickered, throwing light across the table, across the old photograph of Grace that she kept framed beside her lesson plans. In the picture, Grace was laughing, hair flying across her face, desert wind behind her. Evelyn whispered, "You have your place now, sweetheart. The world knows your name." A soft knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Noah standing there, travel-worn but smiling. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. He'd grown older, leaner, steadier, but his eyes were the same. She hugged him hard. "I read the news," he said. "It's official. They called it the heart correction. The university reinstated Dr. Joe's posthumous title. He wanted that for you." "He sent me a letter," she said. "From Geneva." He nodded. "I know. He sent one to me too. Said, 'Keep the equation honest.'" They sat outside on the porch, looking out at the slow pulse of stars above the desert. Noah took out a small hard drive from his pocket. "This is the final archive, the one from Geneva. It's mirrored everywhere now. Europe, Asia, a few universities. It's safe." Evelyn took it gently, holding it like something fragile. "Then it's over," she said. "No," Noah said quietly. "It's beginning. People are rewriting textbooks." The example problem in control theory, the one with the feedback sign, now credits E. Hart, 2024. "You're going to be teaching a new generation, and they'll already know your name." She laughed softly. "Then maybe they'll stop thinking a janitor can't do math." "They'll know better," he said. When he left later that night, the desert had cooled, and the air smelled of sage. Evelyn watched his car lights fade down the road, then turned her eyes back to the stars. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted by memory. She felt accompanied by it. In the stillness, she could almost hear Marcus's voice, calm, thoughtful, exact. "The minus sign doesn't just stabilize systems, Evelyn. It redeems souls." She blew out the candle, leaving the window open to the night. The breeze moved through the room like a long, slow exhale. Somewhere out there, in a city across the ocean, a professor's report was being filed, a database updated, a correction entered into record, the heart correction. And here in the quiet desert where no one came to watch, a woman sat by the open window, whispering a single word into the dark. Grace. The name rose softly, balanced itself in the air, and lingered. The years passed quietly, the way rivers pass through stone, slow, patient, certain. Farmington stayed small. The sky stayed wide. Evelyn's hair turned silver, then white, but her eyes never lost that calm spark of precision, as if she still saw the world in equations, not of numbers anymore, but of choices. Her students grew up. Some left for college, some stayed to work the land, a few wrote her letters from places she'd never been. Each year, before summer ended, she told them the same story, about a janitor at Harvard, a mistake on a board, and a single minus sign that saved lives. The children called it the 3 a.m. story. One spring morning, Evelyn found a letter waiting on her desk. The envelope bore the crimson seal of Harvard University. Inside, a formal invitation. Dear Ms. Hart, on behalf of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, we are honored to invite you to deliver the keynote address at the annual Ethics in Technology Symposium. Your contribution to the heart correction remains one of the most meaningful lessons in the history of modern control systems. The session will be held in Maxwell Dworkin Hall, room H3117. With gratitude, Dean Calloway. She read it 3 times. Then she laughed, quietly, the kind of laugh that doesn't need to reach the surface. Later, she showed Diego, now a grown man teaching music in Albuquerque. "You have to go," he said. "I don't know," she smiled. "That room and I have unfinished business." "Then finish it," he told her. The flight to Boston felt like traveling backward through time. The city looked the same, maybe a little taller, a little faster. When she arrived at the Harvard gates, students streamed by in clusters, the same nervous energy she remembered. Inside Maxwell Dworkin, room H3117 had been repainted, the tables new, but the air still held that faint trace of chalk and ambition. She stood at the doorway a moment before stepping in. On the whiteboard, someone had left a mess of equations from an earlier class, the same kind of tangle she'd once cleaned around, the same symbols that had changed everything. She smiled, took an eraser from the tray, and began to clear the board. Her hand moved slow, sure, as if erasing the last ghosts of the past. That evening, the lecture hall was full. Professors, students, engineers, reporters, even a few people she didn't know, wearing badges that said Helix Life Rehabilitation Division. When her name was announced, she walked to the podium to soft applause. The lights were warm on her face. She looked at the audience and began, "It's been many years since I first stood in this room, though I wasn't invited then. I came with a mop, not a microphone, and I made a mistake of my own. I thought I was invisible. I've learned that the smallest correction can change a system, and sometimes a soul. You don't need titles for that. You only need courage enough to draw one honest line in the right direction." She paused. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. "When I added that minus sign, I didn't know it would matter. I only knew that it was wrong to leave it broken. That's what science is, and what life is. A series of small corrections that keep the world from spinning out of control." Someone in the audience wiped a tear. Dean Calloway stood near the back, his head bowed slightly. "If there's one lesson I can leave with you," she said, "it's this. When you find the courage to fix something small, you're never just changing a formula. You're steadying someone's heart, maybe your own." The applause rose, soft at first, then thunderous. She looked up, blinking against the lights, and for a moment she could almost see them. Marcus Joe, standing at the back of the room, smiling quietly, and beside him, a girl with sunburned cheeks and bright eyes whispering, "Mom, you did it." Later, when the hall emptied, Evelyn stayed behind. She walked to the whiteboard, now filled with student signatures, and reached for the chalk one last time. At the top corner, she wrote, in clear, slow letters, "Stability requires care. E.H." Then, below it, she drew one final symbol, a small, perfect minus sign. The clock on the wall read 3:01 a.m. She set down the chalk and whispered, "Sorry for the spill." The air conditioner sighed, steady and soft, just as it had years ago. She turned off the lights, stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind her. A few months later, back in New Mexico, Evelyn's students gathered in the classroom she'd built. On the wall hung a framed photo from Harvard, her standing in front of the whiteboard. The crowd behind her, a halo of light catching the chalk dust in the air. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The 3 a.m. light, in memory of Grace Hart." When class ended that day, a young boy lingered. "Ms. Hart," he asked, "how did you know which way the sign should go?" She smiled. "Because I listened. The world tells you when it's out of balance, You just have to care enough to hear it." The boy nodded, thinking hard, then whispered, "I'll remember that." "I know you will," she said. That night, Evelyn sat on her porch as the sun sank into the cliffs, the same desert light turning gold one last time. Diego played his guitar softly beside her. The air was warm, and the world felt still. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of sage and dust, and thought of every life the correction had touched, of Marcus, of Noah, of the children now learning her story in classrooms she'd never see. The wind moved through the dry grass with a sound like whispering pages. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, lonely but sure. Evelyn opened her eyes to the deepening blue of evening and said, almost to herself, "The system is stable now." And as the stars appeared, one by one, calm and certain, the last light of the desert settled around her, warm and quiet as a memory finally at rest. Thank you for walking beside Evelyn Hart, for believing that even one quiet act can change everything. The 3 a.m. board was never just about equations. It was about mercy, balance, and the courage to make things right. Thank you for keeping the light on in the dark.